Welcome to Life by Design, episode 358. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Horatio Jug.
Nice. I like that one. Well, I'm happy to be here, as always.
Well, I wanted to give you the upgraded radio voice.
I love it.
We are creators of Life by Design with many locations worldwide. Each week on the show, we discuss the principles and the practice of Life by Design. Today, we're specifically talking about mindful eating. And now, not necessarily as something that we endorse, also not saying we don't endorse it. It's simply a question that came to us from a listener, and they wanted to know what were our thoughts about mindful eating. So we did a little research, we dug in, and we've got some ideas for today. And we just spent the first 53 minutes talking about all these ideas, and of course went down many different paths that are in some ways probably inappropriate for recorded tape, but would be interesting to be a fly on the wall on some of those conversations. So, Horatio, tell us a bit about what you uncovered with mindful eating, what you like about it, what you're not sure about, and what you don't like about it.
Oh, man. I think that's the whole podcast. So my first thing that I didn't like, and this is for everything, this has nothing to do with mindful eating, was that it was hard to get a clear definition of exactly what this is. I attached the Healthline article, which did an excellent job, I think, of, so this is lifebydesign.com/podcast. They actually read the article that we're talking about. And what they did was they attempted to summarize this, right? So they talked about, the practice of mindfulness, which means, drawing attention to what's actually happening in the moment. And then apparently what I got is that mindful eating is, paying attention to the food that you're eating. So how does it make you feel, not eating while you're rushed, not eating, paying attention to the actual food, making sure that you're paying attention to your feelings around the food, which, I mean, based on that, I think there's some really positive things to talk about and to celebrate with this. And I think there's some really things that I would consider harmful or potentially dangerous with this approach as well.
Well, we were talking a bit about in the pre-show about, one, the idea that the lack of definition makes it difficult. And then the other concept that I thought was interesting that we brought up was, allowing people to go down the path of, let's say you're taking on this mindful eating approach as your diet or how you eat, opens you up to, lots of, I think, opportunity to break the rules. And I think the idea of this is that there is no rules. You're mindful, you listen to your body. And I think that kind of goes opposite to what we would suggest in terms of this requirements and strategies, especially when it comes to diet.
What I do like about this approach, let's start, it's always nice to reframe things in the positive. This seems to be the only strategy to eating that mentions or even speaks about the relationship of the person consuming the food with the food. Okay. And when we look at, and I can just speak for myself, like there's still times in my life where under a lot of stress and busy and whatever, that my poorer eating habits come out. Like you have these cravings for food that's not nourishing, is junk food or it's comfort food, and it's taken a lot of work to fix those habits. It's taken a lot of self-awareness and thinking about my food, or like if you want, incorporating some of these principles has actually helped my diet. So I like the idea of, fixing your relationship with food. I like the idea of thinking about what's eating. I think that's super valuable considering everything else is based on the actual food, right? So I'm keto, so I don't eat grains. I'm vegan, so I don't eat meat, right? Like we're excluding food groups in these other cases, where with this approach, it's more about the psychology behind the food, which I think is a huge win.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to that. My initial take, just in hearing the basic framework of mindful eating, would be to take a requirements and strategies approach and then integrate mindfulness into it versus using mindfulness as it's, an approach to eating. Because as I said, I don't love the idea of, I'm going to listen to my body. Well, today I feel like ice cream cake and cookies, and somehow that's okay in the sense that it's going to meet the requirements for my body. I'm not saying it's not okay. It's okay if you've decided it's okay and you're willing to accept the consequences. So we don't want to create, and this is what you were getting at, we're not interested in creating a negative relationship with food, because I do think that's a huge problem. You've got lots of people, what's the name of the condition of people who go too far to the healthy side of things, quote unquote?
Probably
orthorexia, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
Yeah, and so, there's challenges on both sides and going to the extremes in that sense. And I think you need to have a great relationship with food. In a sense, for me, I look at this and I say, I want to know what the requirements are of my body to meet my nutritional needs. And then I want to be able to fulfill those requirements in the best way. And so on level 1, I need to know what are the actual nutrients I need. On level 2, I need to know what are the foods that will deliver those nutrients. And then we start to get into strategy. And I think this is where the mindfulness, as long as the first 2 layers are in place, the mindfulness would be really valuable. Because I know for me, similar to you, I am not mindful when I eat, unless not in the rare instance, but let's say we go out for dinner or we're with friends. I think that's probably the most mindful that I am, is when we're actually, when you guys came down last weekend. We were actually sitting around, and even though the kids were there, they were fine, and we were all eating and having great conversation, and that was wonderful, and it actually was a great weekend. But my day to day with food is very much, I need to eat, right? I have a 45-minute break here between patients. Let me get all the protein in I can, and then I'm already on my next project. And I'm usually eating while I'm working, listening to a podcast, doing all these other things, and at dinner time, probably the same thing. It's like, I just want to go chill out on the couch. Let me just eat this food or get the kids to bed. And I think, yes, once level 1 and 2 are in place, I do agree there's probably a ton of value here with being more mindful about how you're eating and what you're eating.
Yeah, so I totally agree. What you just described is the microcosm for the big macrocosm, of our modern day culture, which is, it seems to be an abandonment of a standard. The reality of it is all food is not good for you. And there is food that is good for you. And blanking out at the difference or refusing to acknowledge the difference does not put you in a better place, right? We were using, the example of the show. I look at somebody like my father. My father's diet is not poor by any means. My mom cooks all the food. They eat, the majority of real food. They're not going out to eat a lot, but there's food that he likes to eat, like pasta, for example, and he eats a lot of pasta. I know he feels good after, right? Like there's no question, because he's told me, what a great meal. I feel so great. I feel so satisfied, which is awesome. I'm super pumped that he's happy with the meal that he ate. However, pasta is devoid of any essential nutrients. It's fortified with stuff. It's very high in carbohydrates, which most people get far too many of. And it's, poor in protein. And there's always the potential to have a reaction with some of the grain or the protein containing grains in there, right? So again, the fact that we're blanking out on the standard and we're saying, okay, well, I'm thinking about my food. I feel good when I eat this food. I don't feel good when I eat this food. It doesn't absolve you of the fact that there's actual requirements for your bodies, that the purpose of your nutrition is to meet those requirements in order to deliver health and nutrients into your body.
So then I guess the question is,
you gave the solution. You gave the solution already, right? The solution first is to find out, right, what what's moral for you, right? Like there might be some foods that are either cultural that you cannot eat. Maybe you don't want to eat pork because of your religion. Maybe you don't want to eat meat because of some ethical reasons or whatever choices you've made. Those are the things you need to figure out first, right? Not blanking. You gave the answer, not blanking out with what your requirements are, and then figuring out how to, get those requirements while being mindful about your food.
Well, there you go. That was my question. My question was going to be, so how do we do this? And so
you answered it. You gave me the answer already.
Oh, there you go. I was ahead of it. And I think, the last point to make, and we may have touched on this, but I think just take it a bit further is, whether it's mindful eating, whether it's just following the requirements and strategies is, what I like about the mindfulness is the awareness. And I think you could actually apply here. It's not, our approach is not mindfulness in terms of, I'm just being aware. It's mindfulness, being aware, but also making a judgment And I know people have an interesting relationship with judgment, but we need to make a judgment as to whether this is something that's good or bad, but not necessarily tie to it the stress and anxiety or the guilt about what it is. And I think that's where the real bigger decision gets made, right? Is understanding this is either good or bad for me, and it's either going to move me towards health or it's going to have a negative consequence. And then I've got to choose that. And mindfulness would definitely help you be more aware in terms of that, also gathering information from experts and so on. But then, the take home is to not necessarily feel guilty about it, but own that choice and own that consequence in either direction.
Yeah, yes, of course. And I'm glad that you brought that up. Far too many of the choices we make today, like you made a choice, it can be good or bad. And that doesn't make you like a weak person or a stupid person, or like you just made the choice. Like I felt like eating ice cream today, like I'll get the next meal, right? Like we don't have to, it's not life or death with every decision that we make here.
Absolutely. And just to finish that off, it may not be life or death. And I think, I don't think we want to live on that edge, it's not to that extreme, but there is the cumulative effect of choice. And I think that's where we want you, if you're listening, we want you to be aware that the choices you make add up in either direction.
Well, I think that's, sorry, just to kind of interject, because you talked about what is orthorexia. I think that's the fanaticism that comes with that. Right. Is the, oh my God, I ate a piece of bread, and now I have gluten in my body. Yeah. You also have an immune system that's able to take care of a limited amount of this stuff, right? Like, let's not pretend like, you're going to explode because you ate a piece of bread. However, you're right. Like, it's still not good for you. You just don't have to like fanaticize about it so much.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And at the same time, I think this is important because I know some people are probably already going there in their mind and they're rationalizing, oh, right, that makes sense. What Kreisho said, everything in moderation. We're also not saying everything in moderation, Kreisho.
No, guys, again, there's a standard, right? The standard is the standard. And whether you like it or not, that's the standard. Like, you need protein, you need fat, and you do better with carbohydrates. You also need micronutrients. And the reality of it is, the more of the food that gives you that stuff that's the least toxic is the best choice that you're going to make for yourself.
Yeah, there you go. So guys, check out the show notes. There's some good stuff in there about mindful eating, and really think about it in the context of what we just talked about. To give it a little bit of background, you can find it there at www.lifebydesign.com/podcast. Find today's episode. And as always, thank you for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.